All right. Thanks, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon session. Just a friendly reminder, if you could please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat as we go along throughout the session. I have the pleasure of introducing your speaker, Ms. Amy Smith. Amy is an education associate to South Carolina Child Early Reading Development and Education Program at the CERDEP in the Office of Early Learning and Literacy at the South Carolina Department of Education. She comes to us with a wealth of experience in early childhood, including a kindergarten teacher, assistant director of a child development center for homeless, needy, and children in poverty, director of an NC 5-star NACE accredited child development center, child development specialist at a resource and referral agency. And she also has a master's degree in early childhood education from the University of South Carolina at Columbia. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Okay, thank you. We have the next slide, please. Thank you. So that was a lovely introduction, but I could never do this presentation or what I do every day without my esteemed colleagues, Lydia and Sherry. Lydia is with our family engagement, and I was thinking, is she bilingual, trilingual? Lydia's quadlingual word, I'm not sure, but I'll let her tell you that. And then Sherry is in our special education department. So you guys have perspectives, or you'll have a lot of different perspectives. So welcome. Okay, next slide. So our objectives, of course, we have to have objectives for our training, and we hope that you guys will be able to implement a substantial portion of the day into your daily schedule. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, we'll teach you. And it is a math calculation, but we've already done the math for you. So don't worry about that. We'll hope that you'll be able to connect outdoor learning transitions through meaningful interactions, and you'll be able to create collaborative anecdotal notes based on daily interactions. And I know sometimes anecdotal notes can seem really overwhelming and really scary, but I promise we have an easy solution for you. So we're going to start off. This is going to be a little hard to do online, but I practice yoga, and I am not really a quiet person. So yoga is the 1 hour of my week when I can really center and be quiet and contemplative. And we're talking a lot about self-care now during COVID. So I can't see you guys. This is on the early childhood honor system that we're all just going to take a series of 5 deep breaths in and out. I'm going to close my eyes, and you guys do it at your own pace. I won't count for you. Let's begin. Okay, I know everybody's breathing is different, so hopefully we're all done. And this is a wonderful exercise to use with children. Sometimes they go from 0 to 100 when they get upset. And I have been known when I go into classrooms to do a little yoga, to do a little breathing, and it's amazing. Even 4-year-olds can do it. And it just gives us, it kind of settles our neurological system and just gets us centered. So let's think about your life. Think about your daily routine. What are non-negotiables? And what brings comfort in these? And what could you adjust? I will share mine. My non-negotiable, no matter what diet I'm on or if I'm trying to be healthy, I always have coffee in the morning, and it must have cream. If I'm traveling, coffee. If I'm at home, coffee. If I'm on the road, coffee in a covered mug. So if you guys don't mind, just tell us something in your daily routine, and how does that bring you comfort? You can just put that in the chat box, and I will try to read them. Walking my dogs. Oh, love that, Sherry. Tea. All right. Not a coffee drinker, but we have a tea drinker here. Exercise. Yeah, Lydia, that's a good one. Lydia and I go to the same gym, and often in the wee hours before it's even sunrise, we see each other at the gym. Yep. Coffee and music. Okay, Barbara likes to do coffee. That's awesome. I mean, music along with her coffee. Making sure my smoothie is well done. Well done, smoothie. Okay. I actually had one today too. Anybody else? Something you must have for breakfast, or a route that you take, or if you maybe some people read devotions. What part of their routine? Okay. Well, thank you. And of course, the whole point of this is we're adults and we need the safety blanket of a daily routine. Well, think about the children in our classrooms. Some, the earliest learners, coming for the very first time. They have been the apple of mom and dad's eye, and now they're coming and have to share two adults with maybe 20 children. So what comforts them? Is it the way you greet them? Is it the way you put out their nap mats? Is it a special treat at snack time? So it's just something it's something I think that we all take for granted, but it's our definite comfort and safety blanket. So this is just a cute little graphic. I learned something new. I don't know if you guys know, this is called a vector diagram. So I just learned that. And it's just, what do we do? This child waters plants outside, goes swimming. And this is also very important when we talk with families about daily routines. Having, if you can, I know it's hectic, a set dinner time, a set bedtime, winding down to go to that bedtime, not all of a sudden they're in the middle of something. You say, okay, time for bed. And maybe that would include reading a story, just things that we might take for granted, but that it's good help the parents with, or having the children maybe lay their clothes out. I know this sometimes can be a battle, but when I taught kindergarten, I would tell my parents, you know what? They want to wear two different shoes and a tutu, let them do it. I had a child, always wanted to wear his rain boots. That's okay. Pick your battles. So things like that can just really ease a family into the day. And then at the end of the day, just with the bedtime rituals and routine. So now we get into the serious things. These are actual tools. I'm not sure if you guys are in child development or schools, but when your classroom is assessed, if you are in a child development center, First Steps uses the Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale. And they just come in and look for best practices. We do exactly the same. We use something called ELCO. Both, or if you're in a classroom or if you're in a child development center, you all should be using the early learning standards. Do you have to have them memorized? No, but you certainly need to know what's appropriate for your age that you're teaching, and also across the continuum, because not all 4-year-olds are going to be smack dab in the middle of the 4-year-old standard. So, and I've also had a talk with my teachers this year. When the children are in centers playing, be sure you can explain and advocate what they're doing. With someone, you know, maybe doesn't have a great early childhood background as you do, comes into the classroom, be able to say, oh, look, here in blocks, they're measuring, or in dramatic play, they're having dinner, but they're also using oral language. So we really expect teachers to be able to share that with people, since we are not, early childhood is not a place where we do a block of training. You're not going to see 9 to 10. We're doing language arts and we're hitting the standards of settings and characters. So we just ask that you be able to articulate that. And that also comes into play when we talk about anecdotal notes. So these early learning standards, as you get to really know them, you'll know about child development. Like I said, it's a continuum. They're not all going to hit it right on the bullseye. And that you can incorporate families' cultures into these. And it guides your plans for implementing your curricula, no matter what it is, the standards, no matter what curricula you use, the standards are met to reach all of them. It also helps you establish goals for children's development that are shared across programs and services. So if you have a child that maybe came from a First Steps program as a 3-year-old in your 4K classroom, you guys are going to be using the same standards and have the same expectations. And they can inform family members and the public on age-appropriate expectations. Now, do we expect parents to be able to decipher these? No, we have a parent-friendly version of the standards, because in education, we use a lot of acronyms. You have to activate a lot of prior knowledge to actually know things in the standards. So that is something that we share with parents. Okay, here's this fun math problem I was telling you guys about. So children's, I think Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers said this, children's work is play. And this is the calculation. On the left, you see, so the number of hours that your program operates. So schools operate 6.5 hours a day. A substantial portion of the day is 2 hours and 10 minutes. They should be immersed in work, in play. I always get the question, well, does it have to be all at once? No. If you do an hour and 2 hour and 5 minute chunks, that's fine. But imagine, you know, there's nothing worse than a child building something with Legos and then, oh, it's time to clean up. Just, you know, they have to have enough time to really get in a serious place. Same with the oral language, you know, when they're talking and they're building with friends, they need a long time. They don't need to be switched all the time. Okay. So what should your learning environment look like? Well, we like to see quiet centers and active centers. Of course, we don't like them to be next to each other. We do not recommend your cozy corner be next to your block center. Blocks and dramatic play usually pair well. I've seen great classrooms that incorporate their writing center along with their art center. So in my opinion, a nicely set up classroom can serve as your third teacher. So if you really give a lot of thought to that, it will really help It will help with classroom management, and it will help with the children's learning. We also like to see pictures with words to label the shelves. I went in a classroom yesterday, and I don't think I've ever seen such a neat and organized classroom. She had bins with pictures and words, and I looked at her and I said, "You guys haven't gone to centers yet today, have you?" She said, "Oh yes, we have." So to me, that said she took her time at the beginning of the year and showed the children how to use things and where to put them back. It was pretty amazing. So we also like to see a space for privacy, but please don't have that in a place where you can't see the children. You always must have a visual on them. I am going to now turn the presentation over to Sherry.
Thank you, Amy. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about those daily routines and schedules. So you all know that having a daily schedule for preschoolers is important. And why? Because the predictability of knowing what comes next helps preschoolers feel secure. It helps them feel comfortable, engaging, and participating in activities in your classroom. And we know that preschoolers don't typically tell time by the clock, but they tell time by knowing what's coming next. So having that daily schedule helps children to predict their day. And another purpose of having that daily schedule is to help you as a teacher to balance your activities between teacher-led, child-led, direct, indirect time. And the other thing that I would remind you about is we all know that things change in our day, sometimes at the last minute. So we may have to make changes to our schedules. And in that case, it's important to tell children about those changes so that they're prepared and they know what's coming next and what their day is going to be like. On this slide, you're going to see some sample schedules for preschool classrooms. And if you're a parent joining us today, I would encourage you to have schedules for home routines and activities as well. So if we can go to the next slide, I've got some pictures here of schedules that you may want to use for students who have disabilities. And we know that children with disabilities may need their schedule altered a bit and may need to be, that schedule may need to be tailored to meet their individual needs, because some children may need a simple first then schedule, like you see in the second picture. Other children may be able to handle a schedule with more activities, but they may need a tactile schedule where they can pull off the symbol for the activity once it's completed so that then they can see the next thing on their list, on their schedule. Other children may need a schedule that incorporates some type of reward, such as once I do these two activities, I'll have time to choose a preferred activity, which is an activity that they like to do. You may give a choice of one of two or three preferred activities, like maybe they like to blow bubbles, maybe they want to jump on a small trampoline, maybe they want to play with Play-Doh. But that involves knowing what the child's preferred activities are. Another example of a schedule is one that breaks apart a particular routine. So you'll see the last picture is of a bedtime routine. And this schedule prepares the child for what has to be done at bedtime. That's a perfect example of something a parent may want to do at home. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to start talking a little bit about meaningful interactions in early childhood education. So we know in early childhood settings, children and teachers interact all day long. We want our interactions with children to be intentional. We want them to be purposeful, and we want them to be culturally responsive. So I encourage you to take that time to slow down and be present for your children. Take the time to connect with children when you're interacting with them. Let them know that you see them and that you are interested in what they are saying, in what they are doing, in what they are thinking. And when children know that you want to spend time with them and that you value what they have to share with you, you create a sense of trust and confidence. And once you have that trust, you can extend their learning. You can support their learning. And one way is by expanding upon their thinking, their language, their vocabulary. So I'm going to turn it over to Lydia, who's going to talk a little bit more about meaningful interactions and what they look like in the classroom.
We can go ahead and up. Yep, there we go. So what does it look like when we consider the meaningful interactions of children within the classroom with early childhood? We really want to build that social emotional domain, that ownership and that confidence that they're developing at these very young ages. So when we're creating these print materials, being mindful that let them define and discuss, understand the world around them. What is the meaning to them? What is the value to them of kindness, for example, of being a good friend, and honoring how they are giving it to us. You know, if they have a language other than English within the home and they define a term in their home language, honor that. Write it in that home language, give them the language in English so that they make the connection, but let them have that confidence that I did it. I was able to define this, participate, and be valued as a member of this classroom family. Again, when we're thinking about print-rich material, if you have other languages other than English, are you labeling in that other home language? Are you creating daily routines that will honor the home language there, where perhaps they're not reading that, but perhaps at the same time, the print in that home language is something that they're familiar with because they've seen the writing or the words at home. Next slide, please. Then when we take it even a step further and we take that literacy component outside, what does reading the world around us mean? How do we explore through play in the outdoors? So many times our kids are with us, or they are with us for a majority of the day, and perhaps they come from environments where being outside isn't safe, or perhaps they come from environments where family members work. So the idea of being outside to play isn't a realistic ask. So how are we creating teachable moments outside so that they're getting the vocabulary, the idea of storytelling, connecting language to the world around them, and understanding that it can connect back to what are those early literacy skill sets. Again, being able to really involve the cultural and linguistic component if you have the ability connecting a text or a theme to the outside play that's developed. A great example is a mud house, right? Allowing them to discuss and observe and develop those domains within a mud house and experience there. Next slide. So meaningful interactions and effectiveness, what does it look like? Are we on the ground with our children while we're playing? Are we sitting at eye level? Are we taking the opportunities to really value and interact with our children and stopping and not being so mindful? We only have 10 minutes. Oh, in this 10 minutes, we have to do this, and cutting them off when they're beginning to share with us and build that confidence with us. And the effectiveness comes out of being able to observe how they're playing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So just being mindful of the opportunities that we're creating, the activities that are guided by the interests of our children, and connected also with that research-based curriculum perhaps that we're using. And then again, just to connect that back into what we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation of the South Carolina Early Learning Standards. How are the interactions that we're having throughout the day really honing and developing, growing those indicators which within each development that they will go through? Here we only have 3 listed out of the 6, but in an instant, in a 5-minute period, we can see so much of a child's growth and development. Cognitively, how are they recognizing and making meaning? Language, what language are we giving and developing as we're interacting? Social emotional during COVID times, it's so important as our youngest learners come into the classroom, perhaps with that first experience that they're having on the educational journey. How are we developing as young learners who are excited to play and learn to play and not stifling that confidence and the identity that they're beginning to form at the early educational moment? And now I will pass it on.
Thank you. So now we're going to talk a little bit about communication with students who have diversities and or developmental delays. And I just want to take a minute to highlight some things to keep in mind when you're communicating with children who have diversities or developmental delays. Keep in mind that communication is more than spoken language. Behavior, body language, gestures, signs, and visuals are all forms of communication. And it's important that we listen to all forms of communication. It may be important for some children to have visuals to help them to communicate. Some children communicate using pictures. It could be a single picture, or it could be a communication board that has many different pictures that they're able to point to in order to communicate with someone else. Some children may use objects. They may use actions to communicate. And regarding alternative forms of communication, those are examples of low-tech forms of communication. But some children may use high-tech forms of communication, such as a communication device. Communication devices range from simple to complex. Simple, you may have something like what we would call a Go Talk. It may have 4 to 6 pictures that they're able to push a button and it says whatever you have programmed in to illustrate that picture. They may have a more high-tech or complex device like an iPad that has a communication app installed on it. They may have an eye gaze device. And another important thing to keep in mind is that we need to alter our language. So we need to be simple and concise and give options. And then when children are ready, we can expand utterances and be a model. So if a child says, outside, you could say, yes, let's go outside. And that's a way to expand those utterances and to increase their vocabulary. Another way to increase language abilities is to ask open-ended questions. So instead of asking a question where a child can respond yes or no, ask an open-ended question. What would you like for breakfast? What would you like to do next? Where did you go this morning? And another thing to think about is to make social interactions rewarding. So when possible, follow the child's lead. Talk about their interest or whatever activity they're engaged in. Be patient and give children time to process and respond. Children with differences and delays may take longer as they're trying to understand what you have asked, and then they have to formulate a response. So recognize that it may take a child a little bit longer and you need to pause and just give them some time. And then finally, and this is probably one of the most important things, is to presume competence. And that means you're always treating children as if they have the ability that allows them to communicate in real life situations in order to fulfill that communicative purpose. So I believe in you and I value what you have to say. Go to the next slide. So the next slide is on teachable moments. And let's talk just for a minute about teachable moments and taking advantage of whatever activity is taking place. So for example, at mealtime, you can take time to have conversations and make connections with friends or family and discuss whatever has transpired over the day. At rest time, think about the child who doesn't want to take a nap. What are other acceptable activities? Maybe the child could have a basket of books to look at that wouldn't interrupt or interfere with children who are resting. Another teachable moment is transitions. When we're transitioning between activities, we can honor those times as yet another opportunity to interact with each other. We also have to keep in mind that transitions are hard for some children. So what can we do to make those times easier or to decrease the likelihood of non-desirable behaviors? So think about earlier when we were talking about daily schedules and the importance of children knowing what is next, then that can help ease those transitions. Next slide. Recognizing when moments happen. We had a video to show you on this slide, but I don't think we're able to do that with the PDF version. So I'm just going to take a minute and explain what happened in this video that we were going to share. What happens is someone in the video is deaf and she communicates via sign language. And the boy walks in the room, proceeds to tell her something, and she immediately signs to him, you know, I'm deaf, I cannot communicate with you verbally. So then the other person decides to learn sign and then joins her at lunch and speaks to her in sign and engages her in that conversation. So he recognized the need to be able to communicate with her. And that's just one illustration of recognizing those opportunities that we have to honor and communicate with others who have different abilities. And I'm going to turn it back over to Lydia now. She's going to talk for a few minutes about anecdotal notes.
So the importance of anecdotal notes connects right back to what we were just speaking about when we're considering those teachable moments, right? When we have those moments during meal times, rest times, transition times, those are phenomenal opportunities to begin to recognize skill sets that are developing or perhaps still lagging and needing more support. But something important to know before even delving in, and again, maybe this is just a gentle reminder of, oh yeah, I knew that, but maybe I haven't been practicing it the best way, is understanding that behavior charts are not anecdotal notes. Anecdotal notes are those explicit, I always call them movies, right? I want a blow by blow of what happened. It's not an opinion, it's just what is happening and what am I seeing. It's so important to know the time, the day, what was the context, what was happening, what was the activity, and the name and the age of the child. And that's important because as we're considering any child, whether they have typical development or non-typical development, whether they are multilingual or monolingual, all of these notes begin to write a story about the child's growth and development as they're moving through their care. They're twofold. For one, you have to be out of your classroom and have another person come in. Leaving anecdotal notes allows the person coming in to pick up right where you left off. They understand where are these children learning, what are the activities, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, how can I best serve them while you're away. Secondly, if a problem arises or there's no problem, you just want to celebrate the child's growth and development, this gives a real solid picture for families and other team members that are part of the education of the small children to see how the child is growing and developing. And then lastly, when you do have that atypically developing child, this serves as a great evidence and support as to how to move forward. Now, connect that back into those times of meal times, really being able to delve into language. What are they able to do? Were they able to grasp the fork, or did they use their fingers? Were they able to dialogue about what they were eating? Were they knowing the names of the foods? Were they able to sit down, pick up their plate, follow two-step instructions, and interact with the peers next to them or even with themselves? All of those components that I just mentioned fall into the domains, and oftentimes in our research-based curriculum, they are points that we're looking for success to be able to build upon those skill sets. So the more detail that we can provide into those anecdotal notes assist us in understanding the growth and development of the children in the care. So here was a moment where we got to observe how anecdotal notes can be taken. And a great activity is your morning meeting, right? We can really sit down with the full group of children and understand through perhaps a large group conversation surrounding a book, surrounding the day, surrounding the daily routine, will there be a change? And as they're in early childhood, often are two teachers really taking advantage of one teacher being able to teach and the second teacher being able to track all data. If you do not have the luxury of having both those teachers, then perhaps picking one or two of those students in that you want to recognize and jot notes down on. When we're considering these anecdotal notes, having that clipboard, that sticky note, that small piece of paper that you can jot just a simple note, the domain, the name, and the time of day, and then go back when there's a more thought moment to refresh what's happened in that interaction. Again, setting yourself up for success based off the anecdotal notes to really create the activity or the activity, knowing that perhaps 3 students won't sit through an entire book. So you're ready to give them a job so that they are successful through that time and not disrupting the rest of the things. Knowing that there are those that perhaps know how to read and will get bored. So letting them come up and be part of the teaching lesson, or even honoring the linguistic diversities because you've taken so many notes, understanding that perhaps they don't have economics of English, but in the home language, they can participate and have teachers and make connections with the activity that you've said.
Lydia, I am
Yes.
so sorry to interrupt. I think we're having a little trouble with the background audio. Do you want me to take over?
Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure what it was, but hopefully it's clear on my end and we're ready for the next slide. Okay, so here is an example of what Lydia was telling you for an anecdotal note, and this could just be on a sticky note. I was actually in a classroom this week and a teacher had them all in a notebook, and she had a tab for each child, but make sure you put the date, the time, the location, probably the most important thing of all, the child's name, because we swear we're going to remember, but we won't. And then just what happened, not your opinion of what happened, just the facts. And then how it ended. And it's so important during the date and time, because date, we can see them progress, hopefully making progress over time. If not, we may need to go back and reteach something. And also the time of day. If it's a time, for instance, transition or something that's hard for them, then we can note that. Or if it's a really successful time of day, we also want to know that. Next slide, please. So, and I'm sorry, Lydia couldn't talk about this because she's so awesome when she talks about this, but I will try to do it justice. So let's diversify our learning in all sorts of things. Activities, Sherry shared with you about different abilities, and I just love the fact, let's presume that they can. And different languages. Lydia, you still haven't shared how many, but Lydia, you guys speaks, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 different languages. And it's so neat because I'm actually learning a little Spanish from her. So just if you use that in the classroom, the children are going to pick up on that. I remember the only time of the day when my kindergartners were silent was when my assistant took roll in sign language. It was such a beautiful thing because they're learning letters in a whole new modality, and they were so smart. They knew they weren't allowed to talk in circle, so they figured out how to sign across the circle. I mean, it was just amazing. So different languages, different cultural backgrounds, and let's incorporate that. Oh, thank you, Lydia. Using technology as a resource is a great strategy when you do not know the home language. Yes, that's awesome. I think you can speak into your phone and it will help you to translate. And that just makes the children feel more at home. I mean, imagine going somewhere where you don't have any idea. We just take it as second nature, but of what people are saying to you. And inviting families to bring home materials to be part of the classroom, print rich items. Yeah, that's a great idea. They can bring things from home. And I had a friend who would have a feast day every month. So a family would cook, or they would help cook just different dishes from their native country, which was so neat. And it helps the child feel special instead of different when they're able to share those things. All right, well, I think this concludes our presentation. And actually, the miracle, I think we're done early. So if you guys have any questions or anything that we can help you with on anecdotal notes or schedules or different transitions, incorporating different cultures into the classroom. Nobody, you just want to get out early. You've had a long day. Okay, we'll give you just about 30 more seconds. Don't be shy. I don't actually think we have a huge group this time. It's hard. Virtually, we don't see you guys. Sherry or Lydia, you guys good? Do you need, nope, good, okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope we had some families. I know we've had some fabulous teachers. I can tell by your contributions. So hope you guys had a great day of training, and hopefully we'll see you in person, if not in cyberspace. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And just a friendly reminder to please make sure you return to the main room for the closing remarks from Dr. Green and Mr. Jameson. Thank you all.
Thanks, Susan.